own side. Speaking of which, the Democrats continue to defend Hillary Clinton, which is very exciting. So the new allegations about Hillary Clinton have basically been that Hillary Clinton sold essentially 20% of the uranium of the United States, or her State Department did, to Rosatom, which was the Russian Atomic Energy Agency, and that at the same time, the Russians were giving all sorts of money to the Clinton Foundation. The FBI and DOJ knew about it and did nothing. Hillary Clinton came out yesterday and she said, no, all this has been debunked, don't you understand? It's been debunked.
I would say it's the same baloney they've been peddling for years, and there's been no credible evidence by anyone. In fact, it's been debunked repeatedly and will continue to be debunked. But here's what they're doing, and really, I have to give them credit. You know, Trump and his allies, including Fox News, are really experts at distraction and diversion. So the closer the investigation about real Russian ties between Trump associates and real Russians, as we heard Jeff Sessions finally admit to in his testimony the other day, the more they want to just throw mud on the wall, and I'm their favorite target, me and, President Obama. We're the ones that they always like to put into the crosshairs. So what she's saying here, first of all, I love C-SPAN Book TV. I've been on it a couple of times. It's always a lot of fun. I do like they're doing this from her kitchen, apparently, like from Grandma's kitchen. But in any case, Hillary Clinton saying that she's completely innocent, this is why she lost, right? I mean, one of the reasons she lost is because she obviously wasn't. And most of the evidence that is now coming out about events that happened with regard to Russia actually is blowing back on things like the Podesta group, not on Trump per se, at least the stuff that's being leaked. So we still have to reserve our judgment on what exactly has happened here. But it doesn't look good for Hillary Clinton. And people on the left who are willing to sort of brush away all of this are making a mistake, I think. Trey Gowdy, who is the head of the House Investigative Subcommittee, House Judiciary and Oversight Committee, he announced on Tuesday a joint investigation into how the FBI handled last year's investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. This, I think, is completely appropriate because, once again, I think it's pretty clear that James Comey had pre-decided the outcome of how this is going to work before it actually happened. So that is another controversy that just will not die. Okay, so I want to get to some things I like, some things I hate, and then we'll deconstruct a little bit of culture. So let's jump right in. So let's begin with things I like today. So, things I like. I just finished reading all the way through Maimonides' Guide to the Perplexed. So people are constantly asking, what's a good book about kind of Jewish philosophy? It's a pretty sophisticated book about Jewish philosophy by Moses Maimonides, who is probably the most famous rabbi in the post-biblical era. Maimonides, Rambam, as he is called in the Jewish community because he's Moses ben Maimon, so Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, RMBM, right, Resh Mem, Bet Mem. So Rambam was the author of the Guide for the Perplexed. This was a series of letters that he basically wrote to one of his students all about trying to square religion with secularism. And it's quite fascinating, especially because there's a bit of a misconception inside some parts of the Orthodox Jewish community that secular learning doesn't play a role in how great rabbinic minds have thought about the world. Half of this book is basically a restatement of Aristotelian theories about the creation of the universe and arguments about it. Maimonides was deeply engaged in secular culture, and that's what makes the Guide for the Perplexed so interesting. He talks about the questions of free will versus determinism. He talks about the questions of God's providence over the universe. He talks about questions about why bad things happen to good people. It's really interesting. This thing was written in the 12th century, rather, and it's still readable. This translation that you see up on your screen here was written, I think it was 1979, and it's a pretty good translation. Now, it is sophisticated. You should probably do some reading about Aristotle before you read this. I would suggest, as I've mentioned, Edward Feser's books on Aristotelian theory. That gives you a good background in this. What's really fascinating culturally is that the Guide for the Perplexed was basically written at about the same time as Thomas Aquinas was writing Summa Theologica, and they mirror a lot of their logic, which makes a lot of sense because Aquinas was a Christian thinker who believed in the Old Testament, and Moses Maimonides was a Jewish thinker who believed in the Old Testament, and both of them believed in Aristotle. So the attempts to square Aristotelian theory with Judeo-Christian belief is one of their missions. It's something in which I deeply believe. Go watch my speech at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, if you're interested in seeing how I think this plays into the American founding. I'm actually writing a book on all of this right now that I'm looking forward to pushing out probably sometime next year. Okay, other things that I like. So yesterday, I showed you the CNN ad talking about how an apple is just an apple, unless, of course, it's not. So a fellow named Greg Tomlin, friend of mine, producer over at Michael Medved's show, he cut this ad in response to the CNN ad.
This is a man. Some people might try to tell you it's a woman. They might scream, woman, 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 over and over and over again. They might put woman in all caps. You might even start to believe that this is a woman. But it's not. This is a man.
So thanks to Greg Tomlin, very funny stuff. Obviously, CNN does not believe that, which is why whenever they do the We Are the Fact Network, you just go, no. Okay, time for a couple of things I hate, then we'll deconstruct some culture. So, things that I hate. So speaking of useless invocation of racism for no particular reason except to annoy people, Jesse Jackson, who, again, should really have very little to say about things racial. Jesse Jackson, given the fact that, he used to call New York Hymietown and such, Jesse Jackson made the statement on Undisputed on Fox Sports 1 that, first of all, I don't know why Jesse Jackson is even on a sports channel. Why is Jesse Jackson on a sports channel? I love that Rush Limbaugh was booted off ESPN for saying that Donovan McNabb was overrated. And Jesse Jackson, it's totally fine for him to be on a sports channel talking about his perspectives on sports. What he's about to say here is so utterly nuts that I just have to play it for you. Here's Jesse Jackson.
All free agencies around the world owe their wages and their benefits to Kurt Flood, who paid the price of rebelling against a system of oppression. And it is oppressive. To go from picking cotton balls to picking footballs and basketballs without freedom is not very much progress. It's just a lateral move. And what strikes me is that in football, the reason why so many guys are standing when the president says, fire them, and we're talking about sons. These boys are not sons. They're sons of mothers who produce champions. They're not sons of the sons of mothers who produce champions. That's what they really are.
Okay, so I don't understand what he's saying in the last part because his Jesse Jackson's patterns of speech are difficult to decipher sometimes. But what he is saying at the beginning there is he says that to go from picking cotton balls to picking footballs and basketballs without freedom is not very much progress. This is so insane. It's so insipid. To suggest that the football players who are earning millions of dollars to play football or basketball players who are earning millions of dollars to play basketball and they don't have freedom, they can say whatever they want off the court. They can do whatever they want off the field. This idea they don't have freedom. I am an employee, right? Or I have employees. If my employees speak out in terrible, awful, evil ways, there are punishments and there are consequences. Okay, the idea that Jesse Jackson is going to go around saying that employees are the same as slaves is just insipid. And again, it's insulting to slaves. I mean, you're really going to equate like Steph Curry with a slave? I don't think Steph Curry would do that. But if this is the line that we're going to use from now on, then race relations are basically dead. Okay, other things that I hate. This cartoon appeared in the Berkeley student newspaper a couple of days ago. Alan Dershowitz was speaking on Berkeley student campus. This one is directly from Der Stürmer. I mean, this is completely from the Nazi newspapers. It's a very ugly picture of Alan Dershowitz with the hook nose and the fat lips. And it says the liberal case for Israel. And then behind, and there's sort of a board that he's putting his face through speaking to students. And then behind the board, there's a foot stomping what appears to be a Palestinian person with a Palestinian flag, and in his hand, an IDF soldier shooting a child. Okay, this is just pure anti-Semitic dribble. The idea that, number one, IDF soldiers are just going around shooting Palestinian children for no reason at all, for fun of it, and that Alan Dershowitz is being paid off by these people because he's a Jewish front, basically for evil Jews. You could legitimately remove the caption, the liberal case for Israel, and just write Judaism, and then you could remove the caption IDF and just put a Jewish star, and this would look like it's directly from a Nazi newspaper. No retractions from the UC Berkeley newspaper. Pretty insane stuff. Okay.
Things are all intertwined. The subject of the Iran deal, if that was something you believed was the golden albatross, as someone in the Obama administration who helped put this together, then it would be worth making some sacrifices. Maybe a bit of your, access and control over uranium supplies here in the United States, maybe some other working with some other unsavory regimes.
Well, I think you're basically just completely underscoring President Trump's point that the Iran deal was incredibly weak for the United States. I mean, you basically just made the case for him. To that point, I think anyone alleging that somehow connections with President Trump and Russia hasn't been litigated enough is insane and hasn't been paying attention to the ridiculous claims that the media has been making over the course of the past few months. And my question about Hillary Clinton this entire time is if we're going to believe that somehow, Russia has got the scoop on President Trump and's got the goods on him, how in the world are we not going to believe that Hillary Clinton put our national security at risk by having an email server as secure as Gmail or less and traveling on international soil. So how do we not believe that Russia has the goods on the United States and or Hillary Clinton and what was on her email server and her emails to begin with? So I would like Congress to get to the bottom of that and what potentially she put at risk in terms of national security.